The series begins in Spain with Olympia waking up to a phone call from her brother Manuel, warning her that the police are on their way to her house. She quickly gets up, smashes every phone she has, and disposes of any evidence that could incriminate her in court. Then she changes her clothes, puts on some makeup, and calls her sister Isa, asking her to take care of her kids until she comes back. When Isa asks what's going on, Olympia reassures her that everything is fine. Moments later, the police arrive. Olympia steps outside to meet them and starts arguing, pretending she's upset because they took too long and she had been waiting for them. Without any resistance, Olympia surrenders herself to the authorities. From there, the story jumps back to 2008, showing Olympia at an amusement park with her husband Alejandro and their daughters, Yuli and Rebecca. They seem to be living a happy life together, and it's clear Olympia loves her husband deeply, despite his poverty. Her father had originally opposed the marriage, but she stood her ground, ran away with Alejandro to another city, married him, and later forced her father to face the reality of her choice. Though he eventually accepted Alejandro as her husband, he continued to dislike him, refusing to interact with him or even welcome him into his home. After spending their time at the amusement park, the family heads to Olympia's father Ramon's house to celebrate his birthday. As soon as they arrive, Ramon greets them warmly, making it obvious that Olympia is his favorite child. In front of all the guests, he praises her, calling her the smartest in the family and openly admitting that he favors her over her siblings. At that moment, Manuel, her brother, looks clearly upset, tired of constantly being undervalued by their father and overshadowed by his sister. His wife, Kata, comforts him, trying to calm him down so he won't ruin the birthday celebration with an argument. Later, everyone gathers to look at Ramon's old photographs, while Alejandro isolates himself quietly in a corner to avoid embarrassment. Ramon then takes his granddaughters to blow out the candles, showing that he adores them just as much as he loves their mother. Even though Yuli and Rebecca are his only grandchildren at that point, it's obvious he would still favor them above any others in the future. After a while, Alejandro approaches Ramon, greeting him, but also noticing that Ramon has opened every gift except his. When Alejandro asks why, Ramon responds rudely, saying he already knows what it is without opening it. It's the same gift he gives every year. Alejandro feels insulted and grows angry, wanting to argue with Ramon because deep down, he still resents him after all these years. Olympia quickly steps in to comfort her husband, telling him her father is just stubborn, but will eventually come around. Alejandro is stunned by her words, reminding her that they've been married for over 5 years, and Ramon still treats him like an enemy, refusing to accept him as family. Olympia becomes tense and upset, struggling to defend her father's behavior, while also unwilling to pressure her family to accept Alejandro despite his poverty. Yet, she's happy with the life they've built together and refuses to abandon him or destroy everything they've worked for. The next day, Alejandro goes to his job in construction, exhausted on his very first day of work. A co-worker checks on him, asking if he needs help, and Alejandro urgently asks him to call his wife. Soon after, Olympia rushes to the hospital, where the doctor informs her that Alejandro has liver cancer. The doctor explains that there is no cure available in Spain, but with treatment, his condition might improve over time. Olympia is shaken, terrified of losing her husband, the man she loves and the center of her life. The doctor suggests surgery to remove the tumor, and they agree. Alejandro is taken into the operating room while Olympia watches anxiously, fearing for his life because the risk of failure is greater than the chance of success. Later, Olympia returns home and finds Alejandro sitting quietly, looking devastated. She notices that the chemotherapy treatments are wearing him down, leaving him so weak and distracted that he no longer pays attention to his surroundings, even ignoring his daughters as they argue nearby. Olympia tries to comfort him, urging him to follow the doctor's advice, eat properly, and continue his treatment. Though he survived the operation, the surgery ultimately failed, and Alejandro is now forced to endure chemotherapy sessions in hopes of keeping him alive. The next day, Olympia goes to the market to work with her mother, and it becomes clear that her mother doesn't like Alejandro either. She asks Olympia if they need money for his treatment, but Olympia refuses, making it clear that she won't take anything from them. She had decided long ago to live independently with Alejandro since her family hates him and refuses to accept him into their lives. Olympia promises her mother that she will find another job to support the household until Alejandro recovers and can return to work. After leaving her mother, she goes for a walk to get some fresh air, and she comes across a flyer advertising work from home. She copies down the phone number, hoping to earn extra income. When she returns home, we see that her new job involves assembling pens. She tells Alejandro that the pay is low, but any extra money will help cover their growing expenses. finances. Soon, the four of them work together every day, assembling 1,000 pens just to get by. Over time, their financial situation worsens, and Olympia runs out of money to support her family. Desperate, she takes her daughters to the supermarket and starts stealing food and drinks. On her way out, she is caught by the store's security guard, who brings her back inside and makes her return everything she tried to take. The store manager tells her he won't call the police for the sake of her daughters, but warns her never to do it again. Embarrassed and shaken, Olympia leaves and spends the little money she has left to buy just a few basic items. Olympia returns home, feeling crushed by the situation she's trapped in. Her brother Manuel talks to her, telling her that siblings only have each other to rely on, and he promises to always stand by her side through every crisis. Later that night, Olympia sneaks into a local restaurant and steals packets of sugar to take home. Suddenly, she notices a young woman selling drugs to a guy in the restaurant. To her shock, she realizes it's her old school friend, Marga. She calls out to her, and the two sit together. Olympia shares that she's pregnant with her third child, which makes Marga really happy. She tells Olympia how much she's missed her since school, and the two reminisce about their old days together. As they talk, Olympia confides in Marga about Alejandro, explaining that he has cancer, and because of the illness and treatments, he's become depressed and spends all his time withdrawn. Desperate, Olympia asks if she can work with her in exchange for a cut of the money. Marga agrees, wanting to help her, but warns that the business is dangerous and she could be arrested at any time. The next day, Olympia drops her daughters off at her friend Tierney's salon, asking her to watch them while she works. Tierney already suspects that Olympia is getting involved in drug dealing, but she doesn't care. She chooses to support her friend the way a loyal friend should. At the end of the day, Olympia returns home to find Alejandro neglecting his medication. When she asks why, he admits that the chemotherapy has clouded his mind, and he can't keep track of what he's supposed to take. He also complains about being left alone for hours while she's out. Olympia apologizes, promising not to leave him again. Later, she slips into the kitchen, hides her drug money inside empty pill bottles, and tucks it away where no one will find it. She continues living this way for months, secretly funding her family without anyone suspecting a thing. One day, Alejandro notices that Olympia has been staying out late, so he asks why she's been going out so often. She lies, telling him she's already explained it before, and that he just doesn't remember because of the medication he's taking. Alejandro believes her and lets it go. The next day, Olympia goes out to work with Marga until the gang leader who controls the area shows up. He looks dangerous, freshly out of prison, and it's clear that Marga knows him. Nervously, she apologizes for selling in his territory and hands over both the money and the drugs, terrified of crossing him. But Olympia refuses to accept this, runs after him, and snatches everything back. She simply cannot afford to lose anything. Every decision now is tied to her husband's treatment and survival. Later, back home, Olympia's family visits to check on Alejandro. Her father notices a brand new chair in the living room, sits on it impressed, and asks where she got it. Olympia lies again, saying Marga gave it to her as a gift. Meanwhile, Manuel goes into the kitchen and accidentally comes across the pill bottles filled with cash. Realizing the truth, he figures out his sister is dealing drugs. He confronts her angrily, telling her this business is sinful, dangerous, and no place for a woman, warning that if their father finds out, it could destroy the family. Olympia snaps back, warning him not to breathe a word to anyone, insisting that this must remain a secret between them. The following day, Olympia heads back to the square to work as usual, leaving her daughters with Tierney. While selling, she notices the gang leader circling the area in his car. She immediately senses he's planning something and keeps her eyes on him. Suddenly, he pulls out a gun and shoots Marga. Olympia breaks down in panic, rushing to her fallen friend and crying over her, terrified that her own life could end next. Out of nowhere, she sees Tierney arriving, but her daughters aren't with her. Her heart stops for a moment until she spots them sitting safely off to the side, and she finally feels a moment of relief. At night, Olympia attends Marga's funeral, where Marga's brother asks her who was responsible for killing his sister. She tells him it was the gang leader from the square, and that she knows what he looks like. After the funeral, he takes her with him, driving around the neighborhood until they spot the gang leader. He stops the car, gets out, walks straight to the man by his vehicle, and shoots him once in the head, killing him instantly. Olympia steps out of the car afterward, throws all the drugs she has into a trash bin, and decides to walk away from the chaos, determined not to risk her life any longer. Suddenly, she feels a sharp pain in her stomach and realizes she's about to go into labor. She calls her mother, asking her to come and take her to the hospital. The story then flashes back to 2002, showing Olympia at the beginning of her relationship with Alejandro. Ramon is furious, so much so that he fires a gun at Alejandro to scare him away from his daughter. He loves her and doesn't want her marrying a poor young man like him. He wants a better life for her than the one she has known. Back in the present, Olympia is in the hospital and wakes up to a terrifying sound in the corridor. She leaves her room and begins seeing strange visions of Marga's death and the gang leader. Suddenly, she sees Alejandro taking her newborn son from her arms. She wakes up startled to discover it was just a nightmare. Her baby boy, Charlie, is still in her arms. The next day, she visits Alejandro's oncologist, telling him that Alejandro isn't taking his medication and isn't eating properly. It's clear she's genuinely afraid for him, especially since there's no effective treatment for his disease in Spain. Refusing to give up, she starts searching online until she finds a hospital in Houston that treats liver cancer with a 90% success rate. She also discovers that a famous actress was successfully treated there. Even though the costs of treatment and travel would be enormous, Olympia decides to take the risk and raise the money to send her husband there, hoping this will finally free him from his pain. Olympia goes to see Tierney, telling her she's in serious trouble and needs help. She asks about the dealer Marga used to work with, but Tierney admits she doesn't know anything. Street-level dealers who sell hash aren't well known. Instead, she tells Olympia she knows someone who could help her get into cocaine dealing, which would bring in more money and give her a real chance to pay for Alejandro's treatment. She explains that her neighbor Valeria and her husband can supply her with what she needs. Olympia thanks her and leaves. She then visits Valeria and makes an agreement with her husband to start working the very next day, though she'll need a motorcycle. Olympia goes to her garage, pulls out Alejandro's old bike, gets it running, and the next morning, she rides to her first customer's house. His name is Julio, and the deal goes smoothly. Her first transaction is a success, and she walks away with cash in hand. That night, she returns home and thanks her sister Isa for watching the girls while she was away. Isa, however, is suspicious of Olympia's frequent absences and presses her about what she's been doing. Olympia finally admits the truth. She's working as a dealer. She justifies it by explaining she's doing everything for Alejandro because she dreams of sending him to Houston for treatment. Isa feels pity for her sister, and though she doesn't approve, she agrees to keep the secret on one condition. Olympia must stop once she has enough money for Alejandro's care. The next day, Olympia sits with Alejandro and notices how distressed he looks. He tells her he's starting to imagine things, hurting her and the children in his mind, and he's terrified that his life will end soon. She comforts him, promising she won't let anything bad happen to him. As time passes, Olympia hires a psychiatrist for Alejandro because his behavior has become increasingly unstable. But Alejandro refuses treatment, consumed by depression, convinced he should just wait for death. His despair boils over. He ends up hitting the psychiatrist and throwing him out of the house. Desperate, Olympia turns to a witch for help. The woman performs a ritual, manages to calm Alejandro down, and convinces him to take his medication before finally putting him to sleep. Olympia continues dealing drugs, earning large sums of money that she hides inside empty pill bottles. One day, she goes to Valeria's house to collect her share from the latest job, but when she arrives, Valeria isn't there. Her husband tells her to just leave the merchandise, and Valeria will give her the cash when she returns. He then tries to make a move on her, but Olympia fights back, hitting him over the head and knocking him to the ground. At that moment, Valeria walks in, shocked by the scene, and asks what happened. Her husband lies, telling her that Olympia was trying to rob them. Outraged, Valeria throws Olympia out of the house, telling her their business together is finished, and warning her never to show her face again. Olympia is devastated, feeling as though all her plans are collapsing, and that this is a major setback in her fight to save Alejandro. The next day, she finds Alejandro with the girls, preparing to leave the house. When she stops him to ask why, he lashes out, accusing her of lying and suspecting that she's been unfaithful because of her constant absences. Determined to leave, he goes to pack his things. Olympia follows him into the room and, in desperation, strikes him on the head, knocking him unconscious. She rushes him to the hospital, where the doctor tells her that Alejandro's condition has become very serious. His depression has worsened to the point of being dangerous, causing him to hallucinate and believe things that aren't real. The doctor decides to keep him hospitalized for several days until his state stabilizes. Olympia visits his room to check on him and apologizes for hitting him, but Alejandro, hurt and resentful, asks her to leave. He can't even stand to look at her. Heartbroken, Olympia later meets with Tierney at a bar, drowning in sadness over how her life has spiraled. She wishes she could turn back time to the days before Alejandro's illness, blaming herself for everything and lamenting that she can't return to her family either, since they always hated Alejandro and begged her to leave him. A little while later, Olympia notices someone staring at her, so she decides to leave the bar and head home, but the man follows her until she confronts him. He introduces introduces himself as Moreno and explains he's connected to Julio, her first customer. He offers her work because he knows she broke off business with Valeria, promising she can make far more money with him since he deals in much larger quantities. Her first job would be to transport 30 kilos of cocaine from Colombia to Spain, and her cut would be 80,000 euros. Olympia is stunned by the offer and asks for time to think. Moreno tells her she has only 48 hours to give him an answer. The next day, Ramon goes to Olympia's house to check on her. He goes into the kitchen for a drink and notices the new refrigerator, then calls Olympia and confronts her about lying, saying he knows she isn't working and could never have bought all these new things overnight. He warns her to stay away from drug dealing. He raised her to be a respectable daughter and will never accept such behavior, and tells her to stop whatever wrong thing she's doing and hide it from their mother because the shock could kill her. The following day, Olympia packs a bag and heads to the airport, lying to her mother that she's visiting a cousin who's ill and needs company. The cousin has agreed to cover for her for money. When Olympia arrives in Colombia, an airport employee recognizes her from a photo of her with Moreno and calls a man named Abel to tell him he's spotted her, arranging for her to be arrested before she can leave the country with the shipment. Back in 2002, we see Olympia secretly talking to Alejandro on the phone behind her father's back. When Ramon catches her, he decides to punish her by cutting off her hair so Alejandro won't even want to look at her again. The next day, she goes to school devastated by her ruined hair. Outside, Alejandro waits for her at the gate, and she sneaks away to meet him. Together, they decide to run off to a new city and start a life far away from her family. In the present, Olympia is still at the airport, getting her paperwork stamped. One of the officers, Diego, turns out to be working for Moreno. He greets her, welcoming her to the country, and wishes her a pleasant stay. She then takes a taxi driven by a man named Raul, who tells her he's been living there for 15 years and promises he can take her anywhere she needs to go, handing her his card in case she ever needs his services. Later, Olympia checks into her hotel to rest. Moreno calls to tell her there's been a delay with the delivery and she'll have to stay in Colombia for a few more days. Furious, she argues with him, reminding him their deal was that she'd pick up the goods and return the same day, but she's forced to accept the change. Olympia calls her mother, lying once again, saying her cousin needs surgery and she must stay by her side for 2 more days. After hanging up, Olympia meets the members of her new crew. She makes it clear she's the leader and orders everyone not to use their real names. Instead, she assigns them aliases: Fufu, Fatsy, Handsome, and the Fool. She tells them to enjoy their time at the hotel until the delivery date, but warns no one leaves without her permission. The men are impressed by her confidence and the fact that a woman has stepped up as their boss. That night, Olympia goes to check that everyone is in their rooms, only to discover that Handsome is missing. Panicked, she immediately calls Raul, telling him to come to the hotel right away. Raul drives Olympia and a group of local taxi drivers around the neighborhood until they track down the bar where Handsome is drinking. When Olympia arrives, she's shocked to see Leo, the airport employee, already there, watching her closely to report every move back to Abel. She argues with Handsome, furious that he disobeyed her, then drags him back to the hotel. Meanwhile, Olympia's mother grows increasingly worried. She calls her niece Murchie to check if Olympia is really with her. Murchie lies, saying Olympia is staying at her place and being cared for. But Olympia's mother doesn't believe it. Her instincts tell her something is wrong. At the same time, Olympia and her crew, with Raul driving, head out to meet the dealer who will supply them. When they arrive, the dealer is shocked to find out the leader is a woman. He mocks her, warning that her life is in danger for stepping into a man's world filled with violent criminals. When he tries to get too close, Olympia snaps, stabbing his hand with a sharp object and threatening him never to touch her again. Impressed by her boldness, he lets her leave, calling her crazy but clearly intrigued by her strength. That night, the crew gathers together, and Olympia realizes Handsome can speak some English. She asks him to help her figure out the cost of treatment at the Houston hospital. Handsome tries calling, but his English is too weak to handle the conversation, so he apologizes. Olympia thanks him anyway and sends him back to his room. On his way, Handsome secretly texts Leo, revealing that their flight is scheduled for the next day at 12:30. In a dark twist, Leo is shown in a garage with Abel, where they're holding Diego, the airport officer who welcomed Olympia earlier, hostage. To stop him from warning Moreno that the crew is about to be arrested at the airport, Leo kills Diego. The next day, Olympia rounds up her crew and has them tape the merchandise to their bodies, warning them about the security gates at the airport. She doesn't want to lose a single one of them. Her only goal is to get back to Spain safely with the load. She splits the gang into 2 cars and rides with Raul because she trusts him. Meanwhile, Leo is at the airport, grinning. He's certain he'll have Olympia arrested before she can leave the country. Then Moreno calls and tells her he's changed the plan. His man at the airport isn't answering calls and is only replying to texts, so she must go to Santa Airport and take a flight in 2 hours. Olympia hangs up and tells the gang the plan has changed. Handsome gets nervous and texts Leo. Olympia notices him acting furtive and asks the fool to grab his phone. When she checks it, she discovers he was betraying her. He intended to hand her over to Leo, so she changes plans again on the spot. She orders Raul to stand aside, storms out with her crew, and they beat Handsome as punishment, strip the drugs from his body, tie him up, and stuff him into the trunk of the car. Back at the hotel, she confronts him about his treachery. He confesses that Abel is a dangerous criminal out for revenge against Moreno, that Abel offered him a huge sum and promised to spare his life if he turned the whole gang in. Handsome begs for forgiveness and even offers to lead her to Abel, but she refuses, telling him she'll leave him in Colombia to face the consequences of his choices, then rips up his passport in front of him. She tells the crew to get ready. They're heading back to Spain as fast as possible. She took Handsome's phone and sent a message to Leo from it, letting him know that she was the gang leader he'd been hunting, that she'd tricked him a second time and had easily exposed his man, which infuriated Leo and made him determined to get rid of her as fast as possible since she'd made herself his enemy instead of Moreno. And she began to think of ways to move the shipment out of the country until she saw a poster of a huge cargo ship and the idea hit her. Use a freighter to get the drugs past the authorities, far from airport checkpoints. Meanwhile, the fool kept beating Handsome until he lost consciousness. They loaded him with them, threw his body into the water to get rid of him before they left, and Olympia stood staring out at the sea, imagining that ships and the ocean would be the means by which she'd become the most powerful baroness in Spain. We flash back to 1998. Manuel is teaching Olympia to drive their father's car, warning her not to crash because their dad would never let them back in. After all, they'd taken the car without his permission since he wouldn't let Olympia learn to drive out of fear for her safety as a girl. Nervous, she fails to hit the brakes properly and crashes the car. Manuel is terrified to go home because he knows their father will be furious. When they return, their father explodes in anger at Manuel for teaching her behind his back. He says he doesn't care if they break 1 or 2 cars, but what he cannot tolerate is being lied to, and he punishes Manuel for the deceit. Back in the present, Moreno calls Olympia to explain a new plan for getting her and the shipment out of Colombia, saying he's arranged a bus to take her to another airport where she'll catch a flight. But Olympia, already with a different idea, keeps staring at the poster of the ship pinned on her room wall. Olympia calls Raul, asking him to come quickly, while at the same time her mother visits her sister to check on Murchi. She asks about Olympia, and Murchi lies, saying Olympia is at the hospital with her and will be home soon. But suddenly, Murchi shows up in person, apologizing for the lie and confessing that Olympia asked her to cover for her because she was going away for a few days. Murchi admits she assumed Olympia was cheating on her husband, traveling with a lover to enjoy herself. Shocked, Olympia's mother leaves, devastated by what she thinks she's discovered about her daughter. Meanwhile, Olympia is at the port negotiating with a ship owner to transport both her crew and the cargo on his vessel for €3,000, half paid up front, the other half upon arrival. The man happily agrees, calling it the deal of a lifetime, and tells her the ship will reach the port of Bilbao in 18 days. Olympia thanks him and leaves. She then heads to the bus station with Raul, where she thanks him for everything he's done and offers him a large amount of money. He refuses, saying he's satisfied with what she already paid and promises that whenever she comes back to Colombia, he'll always be there to drive her wherever she needs. That night, Olympia's mother returns home still shaken, believing her daughter is unfaithful. When she tells Ramon that Olympia is with Murchi and doing fine, he suspects she's lying to cover up the truth. Suddenly, Olympia calls her mother directly, apologizing for lying and admitting she's not with Murchi. She begs her mother to cover for her until she gets back, promising to explain everything then. She insists she hasn't done anything wrong. She's only doing this to save her husband. In her mind, anyone in her position would make the same choice because there's no other way to stop Alejandro's life from slipping away. At the airport the next day, Olympia meets Moreno, who's furious she didn't board the plane as planned. But his anger turns into amazement when he hears she managed to send the crew and the shipment by cargo ship. Even so, he's worried the police might discover it, and if that happens, they'll all be ruined. Olympia reassures him, promising the shipment will arrive in 8 18 days, then asks him for a 15,000 euro advance to pay the ship owner upon delivery. Moreno refuses, telling her she'll get the money only when he sees the cargo with his own eyes. He also confesses that Abel once worked for him but betrayed him, splitting off to take business for himself. Later, Olympia goes to the hospital where Alejandro apologizes for wanting to leave her. He admits he wasn't in his right mind and had forgotten everything until the doctors told him what happened. He tells her the doctors say he'll be discharged that day, and the two return home together. At home, Olympia's mother pulls her into a room and slaps her, calling her a liar and a cheater for sneaking off on a trip with another man while her husband lay in the hospital. Olympia defends herself, insisting her mother has it all wrong, but says she can't explain everything just yet. She'll tell her the truth when the time is right. The next day, Olympia goes around asking friends and acquaintances to lend her money so she can gather the 15,000 euro for the ship, but discovers they're all poor and no one can help. Finally, desperate, she turns to her neighbor Valeria, her last hope, and pleads with her to stand by her just this once. Moved, Valeria agrees to give her the money on one condition. Olympia must pay it back with Valeria's cut from the next deal. Olympia accepts and takes the money. The next day, Olympia returns home with her children and sees the police outside her building. Panicking, she assumes they've come for her. She rushes upstairs, gathers all the money she's been saving for months, and hands it to Alejandro, begging him to take the kids and run. Desperate, she finally confesses that she's been dealing drugs and the police are coming to arrest her. This is his only chance to get out before it's too late. Alejandro is shocked, unable to believe his wife is a criminal with the police at her door, but he takes the money and leaves with the children. Olympia then calls Tierney, asking to borrow her car to escape. She drives off, only to be stopped at a checkpoint where an officer asks for her license. Nervous, she hands it over, but to her surprise, he simply returns it and waves her through. Moments later, she calls Alejandro to tell him to come home. The police weren't after her at all. They had arrested their fourth-floor neighbor for involvement in a terrorist plot, which she'd just seen reported on TV. Olympia is crushed by the realization that she exposed herself unnecessarily, ruining Alejandro's trust. She tries to explain that everything she did was for him, to send him to Houston for treatment, but Alejandro no longer believes her. He tells her not to speak to him or come near him, insisting that even if they live under the same roof, their lives will remain separate. He won't risk his future tied to a criminal who could be jailed at any moment. The following day, Alejandro calls Ramon, telling him he's the only one capable of stopping Olympia, since she fears and respects him more than anyone else. Ramon agrees and asks Alejandro to meet him at his workplace to talk. Days pass until the long-awaited cargo ship finally arrives, and Olympia's face lights up with relief when she sees both the crew and the shipment safe and sound. Olympia delivers the shipment to Moreno, who is impressed by her cleverness. She's the first person to smuggle drugs using cargo ships. He pays her share of the profits and tells her the next job will be in a few days. Moreno also insists she keep her crew close to protect her if anyone tries to come after her. When she returns home, she finds her father waiting. He takes her aside, furious, telling her he knows everything, that she's still dealing, and scolds her for destroying both her life and her family's future. Olympia defends herself, saying she had no choice. She's poor, Alejandro is sick, and even if she asked her father for help, he couldn't provide a fraction of the money needed for treatment. She apologizes, but insists she has to continue on the path she chose. Ramon, disappointed, tells her she's not the daughter he raised. He taught her morals to build a good family, even if he never approved of Alejandro, and adds that her mother has been devastated ever since learning her daughter is a dealer. That night, Olympia tries calling her mother to make peace, but she doesn't answer. Meanwhile, Abel is shown in his hideout with his lover, Lore. We learn that Abel never leaves the safe house because he's afraid of Moreno. Lore urges him to send her brother, Orson, to take out Olympia, warning that she's too smart and will dominate the market. Abel thinks Orson is a fool and not capable of handling someone like her, but eventually agrees to send him anyway. At the same time, Olympia meets Moreno at a restaurant. She tells him she wants to expand their business. She's not satisfied with their current profits and wants to increase distribution areas and earn a bigger cut. Moreno explains that if they transport the merchandise themselves to Italy, their profits will jump by 40%. Olympia likes the idea and agrees, deciding to take the shipment to Italy herself. We flash back to 1992. Olympia, a little girl, is out with her father learning to fish, and it's clear she's a natural even though it's her first time. Her dad teases that she's outperformed Manuel, who's gone with them before and always done worse. And he predicts a great future for her, that her intelligence and drive will let her achieve anything she wants. But he also warns he's afraid money, greed, and the taste of power might lead her down the wrong path. In the present, Olympia buys a new warehouse in Spain in an abandoned area and decides to move cocaine from Colombia to Mexico by sea, hide it inside cars, and route shipments through Italy to boost her profit margin, which forces her to spend very long stretches away from home, while Alejandro stays behind caring for the girls and lying to them that their mother's work requires frequent travel because he can't bring himself to tell them she's a dealer and wants to preserve her dignity in their eyes. One day, she visits Tierney at her loft and is proud of the progress her friend has made. But Tierney confesses her salon is failing and that she plans to quit and join Olympia in the cocaine business. Olympia is shocked and refuses, reminding Tierney that Marga lost her life because of this trade and saying she can't bear to lose two friends in a row, which leaves Tierney hurt and convinced Olympia is only saying that because she's jealous of Tierney's chance to get rich, unable to see it as gratitude after Olympia stood by her and helped her take the first step into the business. Meanwhile, Orson has been tailing Moreno until he watches him walk into a bar. He calls Abel asking for permission to take Olympia out, but Abel warns him to be careful. He remembers Olympia is smart and not easy to eliminate, yet he reluctantly agrees to send him. Olympia goes to her father's house, hoping to have lunch with him, but he refuses to let her in, telling her only her daughters are welcome, since they're his granddaughters. She, however, is banned until she gives up drug dealing and returns to a normal life. Olympia leaves the children with him and walks away, heading straight to meet Moreno. He explains that the buyer in Italy is named Fabrizio and insists he won't negotiate unless he meets the boss of the operation first. But the problem is, Fabrizio won't work with a woman. Olympia reassures Moreno that she'll find a solution, and as they leave, Orson watches from a distance with a gun in his hand, but his nerves betray him. His hands shake uncontrollably, fear taking over, and he can't pull the trigger, letting her go. Later, Olympia visits Manuel, asking him for help one last time. She needs him to pose as the boss in front of Fabrizio and begs him to learn Italian quickly, since the meeting is only a week away. She leaves him with the task and goes. That night, Orson sits in his room when his sister Lore calls, worried for his safety. She pleads with him to back out of the job, but he refuses, insisting that tomorrow he'll bring them news of Olympia. The next day, Olympia heads to the hospital to check on her daughter Rebecca, only to discover the girl has stolen 500 euro from her. Furious, she scolds Rebecca for being a thief, but quickly drops it, taking her home instead. Outside the hospital, the fool is waiting with Isa. The two meet and quickly hit it off, sparks flying between them. Olympia steps out, asking the fool to fetch the car from the garage, and he goes with Isa to spend more time together. All the while, Orson lurks in the shadows, watching Olympia from afar. Olympia leaves with the fool and the others, then later heads with Moreno and Manuel to meet Fabrizio. Before going in, Moreno asks her to trust him, since he's been working with Fabrizio for years. But when they arrive, Fabrizio makes Olympia wait outside, not knowing she's the real boss and saying he doesn't trust her. Inside, Manuel foolishly offers Fabrizio 30% of the car deal, despite Olympia's strict instructions to stay silent and let Moreno handle it. Furious, Olympia scolds her brother afterward for ruining her negotiation. Back at the warehouse, one of her men shows her the hidden compartment he's built under a car seat to stash cocaine. Confident the police will never detect it, Olympia orders the drugs loaded so they can get moving. That night, she sends Manuel and Fufu off in the car with clear instructions: don't stop anywhere, and call her immediately if anything goes wrong. Afterward, Moreno suggests they go out together to unwind and forget the stress of business. Olympia agrees on one condition: that he doesn't mistake it for a date, reminding him she's married and loves her husband. Moreno assures her he sees her as a daughter and a partner, never mixing business with personal feelings. Meanwhile, Orson has been tailing them the entire time. On the bus behind them, he waits for Olympia to stand up, then moves toward her with his gun drawn. Suddenly, she shoves him, sending him crashing to the floor and hitting his head. He scrambles back up and chases her into the streets. But just as he's about to pull the trigger, a car slams into him, finishing the job and ending the threat. On the other side, after hours of driving, Fufu grows exhausted and suggests resting at a roadside stop until the next day. Manuel refuses, reminding him of Olympia's orders not to stop under any circumstances, and offers to take over driving so they can keep going. Manuel, fighting sleep, buys caffeine pills to stay awake, and pushes himself too hard behind the wheel. As he gulps down pill after pill, his body gives out. He spirals into hysteria, suffers the onset of a heart attack, and loses control of the car, flipping it on the roadside. The shipment scatters everywhere, and in desperation, he calls Olympia to confess what's happened. We flash back to Olympia as a baby crying endlessly. Manuel, overwhelmed with jealousy, tries to smother her to silence her, but their mother rushes in just in time to save her. When she asks why, Manuel admits he hates Olympia, convinced she's stolen the love that should have been his, believing he's more deserving than she ever was. In the present, Olympia knows Fabrizio will come after her family after Manuel ruined everything, so she rushes Alejandro and the girls into a car with Fazzi and drives them to a safe house on the city's edge. There, Fazzi introduces her to a new bodyguard, Yuri, assigned to protect her at all times and follow any order she gives. Olympia goes inside, trying to speak with Alejandro, but he refuses, suspicious she's having affairs with the men in her crew. Stung by his accusations, she storms outside to sit with the gang instead. Not long after, Manuel arrives with Fufu and his wife, Kata. Olympia explodes, blaming him for every disaster in her life, from trying to kill her as a child to destroying the empire she bled to build. Manuel, ashamed, apologizes, admitting he's a failure. But Kata, mistrustful, believes her husband has been lying and cheating, so he brought her along to prove he really is part of a cartel and not making it up. The next day, Isa spends time with the fool, and they open up to each other. He admits it's the first time he's truly fallen in love with a woman and wants to marry her and build a life together. Isa tells him that in her family's tradition, he must first win her heart, then run away with her to marry in secret, and only afterward confront her father to force him to accept the reality of their union. Meanwhile, Olympia arrives in Italy with Manuel and Moreno. She leaves Kata waiting in a restaurant, warning her that if Fabrizio decides to kill them, he'll send 2 men on a scooter to finish her off. So if she sees that, she should run immediately. Soon after, Kata spots 2 young men on a scooter heading her way. Terrified, she runs into the bathroom, locks herself in, and refuses to come out. At Fabrizio's home, Olympia finds him furious with Manuel, threatening to destroy him and his family unless he gets his money back. Manuel apologizes, begging forgiveness and offering to pay him more for a new job, this time promising him double his usual cut. Fabrizio, however, orders Olympia out of the room, refusing to deal with a woman as he did before. But this time, she refuses to back down. She confronts him, revealing that she is the true leader of the cartel, the one who gives orders, plans, and manages everything. She explains that she only used her brother as a stand-in because she knew Fabrizio didn't like working with women. Now that the truth is out, she offers him the deal again. Give her the money, and he'll get double the profit. Impressed by her boldness, Fabrizio agrees instantly, admitting he admires her and predicting she'll soon build an empire of her own. Afterward, Olympia, Manuel, and Moreno return to the restaurant to collect Kata, who's still hiding in the bathroom. She only comes out when she sees them waiting for her, and together they prepare to return to Spain. On the way, Kata talks about Ramon and his anniversary party, and Olympia is shocked to learn she hasn't even been invited. Her father still refuses to forgive her after discovering she's a drug baroness. Later, Olympia decides to go anyway. She takes her 2 daughters to the anniversary celebration, but when they arrive, she leaves them at the door with the family while she stays back with Yuri, her bodyguard. Inside, every attempt she makes to greet relatives is met with rejection. No one will shake her hand or acknowledge her. She's treated like an outcast, judged as a criminal destroying young lives with drugs, even though she insists she only did it to save her husband. To her family, risking countless lives for one man doesn't justify her choices. Upset, she storms home, changes her clothes, and returns to the party, determined to face them head-on. Walking straight onto the stage, she delivers an emotional speech. She lashes out at them for turning their backs on her, reminding them that family is supposed to stand together in hard times as well as good ones. She defends herself, insisting she never set out to harm anyone. Her only thought was to save Alejandro. She accuses them of never once offering help, of sharpening their knives against her the moment they learned she was dealing, instead of supporting her. She's certain that if she hadn't taken this path, nobody would have stepped in to feed her children or pay for her husband's treatment. Her words only enrage Ramon further. He declares that she will never be accepted back into the family until she leaves the criminal world behind forever. The night ends in chaos, the anniversary ruined by Olympia's presence. Guests leave one by one, but Olympia feels a strange relief. At last, she's spoken the truth she'd been bottling up, no longer hiding from her family or their judgment. In the aftermath, nearly everyone in her family cuts ties with her, except for Isa, her sister. Though doubtful of Olympia's choices and fearful of the damage they've already caused, Isa believes that as a sister, it's her duty to stay by her side. Even if Olympia's empire destroys them all, she refuses to abandon her. In the final stretch of the series, we see Manuel confiding in Fufu, bitter and envious, admitting he wants Olympia's place because he believes she's taken everything that should have been his. He vows to reclaim his rightful role as the true leader. Meanwhile, Olympia returns home to find Alejandro preparing waffles laced with his entire stock of sleeping pills, ready to end his life. When she tries to stop him, he grabs a knife and presses it to his neck, demanding she call their daughters so they can leave with him. He doesn't want to live with a liar and a traitor like her anymore. Just before he can harm himself, Yuri steps in from behind and chokes Alejandro until he loses consciousness. Desperate to save him, Olympia hires a private bodyguard specifically for him, instructing the man to escort Alejandro safely to Houston and update her once he's settled in the hospital. At the same time, the fool is standing outside Leo's house watching him, but Leo spots him and gives chase, intent on killing him. The fool frantically calls Moreno for help, but there's no answer. Moreno has already been killed, his body dumped on the ground. Cornered, the fool calls Olympia, apologizing that he's failed her, only for the sound of bullets to cut him off mid-sentence. Leo picks up the phone, speaks directly to Olympia, and coldly tells her he's on his way to finish her off too. And with that chilling call, the series ends. Olympia's empire hanging in the balance, her enemies closing in, her family torn apart, and her fate left uncertain.